Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast, where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today is a relatively slow news cycle for the Orlando Magic, so we're going to get through a quick episode. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content, and let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting off with the Magic waiving Ethan Thompson, a player who was originally on a two-way contract, a guy who gives, real versatility at the guard spot, as a guy who's like a big wing type, handles the ball a little bit, showed flashes on the Orlando Magic roster in his stint here, but just a casualty of war, man. This is a guy that is going to probably find a home somewhere else as a dude who I think can really play at a high level. But the Orlando Magic, when you look at what they've got roster spot-wise, particularly at the guard position, especially what they're trying to do in terms of building up a player like Tristan Dilva on the wing, Jace Richardson and Noah Pinda both being up-and-coming players on this roster as well. Like I said, Ethan Thompson just became kind of a casualty of war in the situation for our Orlando Magic team that's already creeping up on the second apron, doing everything they can to be able to maintain their roster spot flexibility, and also just kind of understanding that from a player development standpoint, they got a couple guys in the fray who just have a little bit higher upside than Ethan Thompson, and are guys that I think are going to contribute in a much higher way, much more significant way than Ethan Thompson moving forward. Shout out to Ethan Thompson, though. Hope he ends up finding another home very, very soon. Next up, let's go move on to somebody that I mentioned a second ago as a developing prospect in Tristan Dilva. Tristan Dilva, to me, is actually the most interesting prospect of the three guys that we have, mainly because I like what Noah Pinda brings to the table. We also understand what he kind of is outside of the fact that he's not a knockdown three-point shooter, right? He adds that three-point shooting element. It completely changes his player type dynamic. Jace Richardson, we have a pretty good understanding of what he brings to the table as a guy, who can do a lot with the ball in his hands, operate as a point guard, be able to shoot the ball from distance, obviously be able to shoot the ball at a high clip, both in the mid-range, off the catch, and things of that nature. We understand what Jace Richardson brings to the table. But Tristan Dilva is the guy that I think, in terms of developing on-ball chops, is going to be so important for him to grow as a player. He's a guy that I think is going to be able to develop as an on-ball guy and take after what Franz Wagner does on offense for the main unit and come off the bench and maybe be that guy for the bench unit in a way that allows us to continue to be, a high-level scoring team, even without Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner on the floor. Tristan Dilva is going to be so important in Eurobasket. I read an article that kind of mentioned the developmental aspect of him playing for Team Germany and how his role with Team Germany actually will be very similar to the role that the Orlando Magic will be asking him to do on the main team, which makes Eurobasket very important for a player like Tristan Dilva because it brings to the table the opportunity for the Orlando Magic to get a better view of how to use him on the main team. I think it's very interesting. I'm going to read something that I did see that I thought would be kind of an important aspect of Eurobasket's contribution to what we should be looking for, right? So it says, the problem with analyzing summer league stats and analyzing play in summer league is how important context is. Tristan Dilva was essentially the best player on the Orlando Magic's summer league roster. He got more defensive attention and more on-ball responsibility than he normally would with the main roster. All of that will be valuable, but that is not what the Magic will ask him to do when he joins the main roster. If Dilva is going to get a rotation spot, he needs to fill gaps, space the floor with his shooting, and defend well. Dilva showed a lot of that in his time at Summer League. The Magic should have left with more confidence, but nothing will replace the opportunity in front of Dilva with the German national team. Playing for Germany at Eurobasket would be a chance for Dilva to fill the exact role he would play with the Magic in a high-pressure, high-stakes team. Yeah, man. Like he says, Dilva has a real opportunity to kind of unlock and really share what his skill set looks like translatable-wise to the main roster on a stage that not only will bring more attention to him, but also potentially inadvertently earn him real roster minutes. Like, it's not too many times that you would pull from summertime play when it comes to making decisions like how you plan on running your rotation. But Tristan Dilva has the chance to give the Orlando Magic real tape on him of what he can do at a high level on a big stage operating as a second unit guy, or even if he plays for the first unit for Germany, it's the role, it's the responsibility that he will be asked again to be able to spread the floor, to shoot from distance, to defend in space. Because you got to think, right? He's going to be playing next to Franz Wagner. Dennis Schroeder is likely going to be on this team as well. Like this team, this Germany team has real history. For those that don't know, this Germany squad has pretty much brought back the same dudes to maintain their roster for the last handful of years. So this team is well established. So Tristan Dilva is going to be coming in and essentially filling in a particular role, very similar to what can be said about what the Orlando Magic have been building. So I'm interested to see what Silva brings to the table. I know we talked about what we were intrigued about seeing Franz do at Eurobasket, but Silva could also be a very interesting prospect from that perspective because he's a guy who I think could legitimately carve out a role for himself early by giving the Orlando Magic a better understanding of what he brings to the table for a team that's now built the way they are with the floor spacing they have and the desperate need for a backup wing who can ball handle, similar to guys like Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero. Next up, let's go ahead and move to yet another power ranking, and the Orlando Magic are moving on up in the world as a guy by the name of Law Murray, who's a insider for The Athletic, put together a power ranking, putting the Orlando Magic at number 8, saying Orlando made one of the earliest moves of the offseason when it traded Caldwell Pope to Memphis in exchange for Bane, going from 34.2% three-point shooter to a 39.2% three-point shooter. Now Caldwell Pope made 38.3% of his threes in the previous 8 seasons before joining the Magic, so Bane will at least be a test case of whether Caldwell Pope's off year was due simply to player decline or the annually atrocious shooting environment Orlando seems to be in. Time will tell, and it is a big swing factor in the East. The only teams that are ranked higher than the Magic were the Los Angeles Clippers, the Houston Rockets, Denver Nuggets, Minnesota Timberwolves, Cleveland Cavaliers, New York Knicks, and Oklahoma City Thunder. If Bane can play well for the Magic in his first season with the team, and if his teammates can stay healthy, Orlando should be one of the top teams in the East. Pretty consistent here, right? The Orlando Magic continue to be slotted somewhere around the top 8 with the the two mainstays in the Eastern Conference being slotted above them, being the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks. For relatively understandable reasons, the Cleveland Cavaliers upgrade at the small forward / backup point guard position by bringing in Lonzo Ball. The New York Knicks build off their last season by bringing in Mike Brown, who has much more of a diverse offensive mind. You also grab Gershon Yabusele, who desperately helps them in terms of their front court when it comes to depth, especially given the fact that Mitchell Robinson is pretty injury prone. And you also get Jordan Clarkson, who adds another ball handler, desperately giving them another offensive option outside of Jalen Brunson at the point guard position. I mean, you understand it, right? Also proven commodities. Again, two teams that have had at least relative success in the postseason with the two main guys that they have being Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell at the guard spots. Paulo Banchero has yet to win a playoff series as the main guy and has the chance to do that this upcoming season. Some of the other teams that kind of hopped into the fray, the Clippers weren't a team that was considered to be a team that was better than the Orlando Magic until very recently, obviously bringing in Brook Lopez, Bradley Beal, Chris Paul, right? So they were able to do a lot this offseason. Minnesota is a team that I haven't heard about too much being ranked above the Orlando Magic. I'm not surprised that there's a lot of belief in Anthony Edwards taking yet another step in the right direction. Guys like Naz Reid having a more open role, things of that nature as well, right? So there's a real developmental pathway for Minnesota to continue to build on what they've done over the last 2 to 3 years. So the Orlando Magic being still slotted as the 3rd best team in the East and the 8th best team in the entire NBA. Pretty on brand with the way things have been over the last couple of weeks. And I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to be slotted in that space even as free agency continues to progress, just given the fact that I don't think particularly in the East, unless you're talking about the Atlanta Hawks, I don't think that there's any other team that you can say has improved in terms of what they directly need, in terms of what they feel as though is best going to upgrade them from last season to this season than the Orlando Magic with what they've done this offseason. I think that the Atlanta Hawks probably, at least in terms of the Eastern Conference, had the best offseason of any team in the East outside of Orlando, in my personal opinion. And I think that Orlando, talent wise, is still better than Atlanta now. So them being slotted above Atlanta, but just behind teams like Cleveland and New York, not the craziest thing in the world. And last but not least, we are going to finish up on yet another backup two guard that the Orlando Magic could potentially target. Right, last episode we talked about the idea of the Orlando Magic going after Malik Monk, and a lot of you guys seemed pretty excited about the idea of moving off a guy like Jonathan Isaac for Malik Monk. I was actually a little skeptical about it. I thought a lot more people were going to be nervous about the idea of trading Isaac just for another shooting guard. Now, again, yes, I've said on multiple episodes that we desperately need the depth at backup shooting guard, but I feel as though Jace Richardson can fill the role and things of that nature. But Malik Monk and what he brings to the table just seemed like a significantly better commodity than Jace Richardson, and also is a guy who's a proven sixth man of the year type of candidate, where we know that if you add that to this roster with what we already have, could be a dangerous off the bench scoring punch. Here's yet another one where there's news that says that Jaden Ivy could be a guy that is on the trade block. So let me go to exactly what was said. As the franchise prepares a run for a championship, it doesn't hurt to add more youth, especially at the right price. It's been reported that the Detroit Pistons guard Jaden Ivy has been in early trade chatter. He was the fifth pick in the same draft class as Paulo Banchero in 2022, averaged 15.8 points per game, along with 3.7 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and on doing this through the first two seasons. The former Purdue prospect has proven to be one of the most talented young guards in the league. However, it all took a turn this past season when Ivy suffered a broken fibula in his left leg and proceeded to miss the rest of the year after only 30 games. Let's go further down and say what exactly the trade package would look like. And it says that the Orlando Magic will get Jaden Ivy, and in return, the Pistons would get Jet Howard, Goga Batadze, the 2027 first-round pick, being Orlando's, and a 2029 second-round pick. It says Batadze is a six-year veteran center who would immediately add size for the Pistons. Isaiah Stewart and Paul Reed are both lengthy but undersized. He'd be an immediate upgrade to the team's center depth. Howard hasn't been able to crack the Magic's rotation consistently and establish himself, but new scenery could be beneficial. And it says Ivy would boost the Magic's bench production, which ranked bottom half in points per game this past season at 35.8. He'll enter the final year of his rookie contract, and market value isn't too high, so he's in reach with a decent deal in return. Now, Jaden Ivy is not Malik Monk, but notice in that trade, because he's not Malik Monk, you don't have to give up Jonathan Isaac. You only have to give up Howard, who I said in the same episode I'm cool with getting off of, Goga Batadze, who I'm not as big about trading, but understandably so. If we're trying to increase scoring output off the bench, somebody's going to have to be sacrificed. And from our depth, again, Goga Batadze. At some point, I might do a list on like the most expendable on the roster. Goga Batadze is probably not number one, but he's probably at least number two, just based off of his contract situation, which is not as terrible, but is one where I think Goga Batadze is, and somebody said this in the comment section, he is a little bit underappreciated, especially within Orlando Magic brass. But I also believe that he's a guy that we understand has the chance to maybe make $20 million on the open market. Why is that? Because I think that he can be about as good as a guy like Jakob Poeltl, because what he provides defensively is up there from an energy perspective, and he can be a high motor guy offensively. So with that two-way ability at the center position, can he be deserving of $22 million a year? Yes. If Nicholas Claxton or Jakob Poeltl can get that kind of money, if Clint Capella can get $14, $15 million on the open market, I think Goga Batadze deserves more money than Clint Capella at this stage in his career, right? So I think the biggest thing is also understanding that the likelihood that we can bring back Goga Batadze on a team-friendly deal, with the fact that the center position, especially the backup center position, is so much more valued than it was in past seasons. It may be harder to retain a guy like Goga Batadze. a la why his name keeps coming up in trade talk so much. So to get a guy like Jaden Ivy who brings real offensive punch off the bench, I think that could be a really faithful trade, especially given the fact that, again, all you're doing is giving up a 2027 first round pick, which, again, the Orlando Magic expect to be picking in the 20s around 2027, and then a second round pick later down the line. Again, the juice is worth the squeeze. You get an offensive punch off the bench in a real way, and all you're really sacrificing is a backup center who, again, might not even be on your roster long term, especially given the fact that you still have Mo Wagner and you still have Wendell Carter Jr., and you have the chance to maybe be able to go out and get another center or just call up Orlando Robinson, who you have on a two-way deal. And then the other guy is Jet Howard, who, again, if I'm being honest, I don't think is going to get real minutes this year. I think a lot of people view him as a guy who has a chance to maybe open things up now that Caleb Houston isn't on the roster. No, I just genuinely believe that Jace Richardson is a better player than him, and I think that if we don't trade for a backup two guard, I believe that Jace Richardson is worthy and deserving of getting a shot at that backup two guard position out the gate, and it's his job to lose. That's my personal opinion. You guys can let me know in the comment section down below whether or not you agree with that in terms of whether or not Jace Richardson just definitively should be the backup two guard. But I think he truly should be if we do not acquire a backup guy. Now, if we get a Malik Monk, if we get a Jaden Ivy, it changes the perspective around things. And maybe Jace spends a lot more time in the G League than we anticipate. But if that's not the case, and the roster gets rolled out exactly as it's set right now, I believe that Jace Richardson should be the backup two guard on this team, which makes a guy like Jet Howard very expendable. But let's focus back on Jaden Ivy. I think that Jaden Ivy, similar to Malik Monk, can bring a lot of the same kind of things from an offensive perspective in terms of being able to push the floor, shoot the ball relatively decent. Jaden Ivy is around 35% from beyond the arc, so nothing crazy. Definitely not the volume that a guy like Malik Monk has. I think Malik Monk is better at finishing around the basket, definitely a more hyper athlete. But I think that Jaden Ivy is still a very athletic guard for the position, very quick, can handle the ball. I think he can get a lot better at operating in half-court sets. And I think around a guy like Paolo Banchero, who's a high-level passer similar to Cade Cunningham, there's going to be real attention drawing that opens up the floor more for Jaden Ivy to attack closeouts and things of that nature. So I think that if we couldn't get Malik Monk, Jaden Ivy would be a pretty good budget baller version of being able to get Malik Monk. But you guys let me know down in the comment section down below, should we be targeting a guy like Jaden Ivy, whose name apparently is picking up steam in the trade on the trade block? It'll be interesting to see what you guys say down below. But with that being said, this is another episode of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Magic content. And I will talk to you guys again tomorrow. Peace.